Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for being here. I'm Sarah Dietrich, and my professional work focuses on TESOL, so teaching English to speakers of other languages. I'm a teacher educator, and for the past little bit more than 10 years, I've been incorporating virtual exchange into my classes. And so I'd like to talk with you today about a little bit about virtual exchange, but it sounds like most of you know what that is already, so we won't spend too much time on it. Share with you an example of a project that I was involved with, tell you briefly about the participants and the project itself, and then more importantly, talk about some of the outcomes and some of the things that didn't happen. I think we can learn a lot from our mistakes, and I try to model that for my students, intentionally or not, and would like to share with you some of the lessons learned, quote unquote, for future projects. So again, I think that many of you are acquainted with virtual exchange. You know that it brings together participants from different parts of the world, can bring together people with very different backgrounds. Research has found that it's most effective when it pushes learners and pushes teachers out of their comfort zones. For students and for teachers, it can offer an opportunity to put theory into practice and to deepen students' understanding of the course concepts that they're exploring. And more specifically for teachers, it offers an opportunity to build what is called techno-semio-pedagogical competence, which is a very long word. And you can imagine, some of you who speak French, that it's originally a French word, but it refers to using technology in a classroom setting. And finally, something that I have been focusing on a great deal recently is the fact that virtual exchange offers opportunities for participants to think about themselves, think about the people that they're interacting with, and think about the world and really reconsider, renegotiate these identities together. So, as I expect you know, there can be some challenges in putting together virtual exchange, the challenges of time zones, uh, also reliable technology. So the first project that I worked on brought together people in the United States and people in Afghanistan. So there were either 9.5 or 10.5 and 11.5 hour time differences. You can imagine with that group and also with the group I'll be telling you about today, there were challenges with technology because the group that we're talking about today were in Ukraine. And of course, we're having interruptions in electricity and in internet. There can be challenges linked to language, and I just want to acknowledge and thank all of you for allowing me to present in English. And I'm very aware that I'm presenting in the language that I grew up speaking and that some of you are not. And I think that that's a very important thing for us to acknowledge, particularly within the field of TESOL, is that uh, place of privilege that some participants might have, and how using the fact that English is often the lingua franca for online interactions like the ones we're all involved in right now, thinking about some of the power differentials that can exist. There can be, as in any project, the challenge of different individual expectations. And I think that, as I mentioned on the previous slide, something that is very important to me, but can also be a challenge, is creating opportunities within virtual exchange for participants to interact and to learn about themselves, others, and the world. So some key things, and again, I think I'm preaching to the converted, as they say, that are important in virtual exchange are really planning ahead of time, which doesn't mean that the unexpected won't happen, but it's good to have a set of expectations from the beginning, thinking about both the logistics and also the format and the goals of the virtual exchange. It's important that all of the collaborators be involved. So the project that I'll be talking about, I was working with colleagues in Ukraine, and so we needed to work together to think about what we wanted all of the participants to learn. It's a challenge sometimes and very important to think about how the project fits into whatever course you are looking at. I was reading a literature review yesterday about how virtual exchange is sometimes sort of an add-on to courses, and the authors were challenging teachers to think about how to really integrate virtual exchange into courses. And they also need to think about how the course will be, how the activities will be assessed, and how the project will be assessed, and how the students will be assessed. So the project that I'd like to tell you about today, as I mentioned, brought together pre-service teachers in Ukraine. It was uh, two 2 years ago. So Ukraine was a country at war at that point, as it still is. There were 36 pre-service teachers, so they were in their last semester of a 4-year course that was preparing them to be English and German teachers. We decided to make participation in the virtual exchange optional for these students because they were actually doing their teaching practicum, their student teaching during the semester, and didn't have any formal courses. So not all of the participants completed all of the activities over the course of the semester. In contrast, the 16 students who were in a course that I was teaching at a university in the United States, the project was part of their coursework, and so they completed all of the activities. And you can see that even though the students and the class was based in the United States, the students came from a variety of different backgrounds, and many of them actually had a good deal of experience as teachers. So the focus of the course that the US-based students were in was how to leverage technology in language classrooms. Their course was 16 weeks, which is sort of a standard length for a semester in the United States. But the project was only 8 weeks long. And that's another challenge, as I'm sure you know, is aligning projects up when semesters are start and stop at different times in different countries. And what all of the participants engaged in was weekly online posts and activities. So just to give you an idea of what kinds of things the participants were doing, here is one activity that they did one week. We were focusing on how to use technology in teaching reading. And so you can see that they were asked to use technology to do a think aloud, a read aloud of a text, and to think about how they would use technology in the classroom with their students. I mentioned earlier the importance of assessment, and something that I integrate into any course that I teach, and also into any virtual exchange project, is reflection. And so as a researcher, I was able to look at pre-project reflection, where people were thinking about what they expected, what they hoped to get out of the project, a post-project reflection, and then we also gave an online anonymous survey to gather some more data. So with the reflections, I knew who was writing the reflections, as opposed to the survey, where students might have felt more comfortable in being honest about any critiques they had. And I also had, obviously, the access to the different weekly activities that the students completed. So I mentioned earlier that these are some of the things that virtual exchange can do. And I've put a sort of darker, I guess, or the white check marks are next to the things that I think this project accomplished. So it brought together participants from different backgrounds, and people who otherwise would not have had a chance to meet one another. It also, I believe, and I'll show you from some of the student reflections, bridged theory into practice and gave the students opportunities to use technology in their learning and think about how to use technology in their own teaching. To some extent, I think that this project pushed some of the learners and teachers out of their comfort zones. And I think it really failed to offer the opportunities that I hoped it would offer to renegotiate and reconstruct their identities together. So here's some quotes from the students from the reflections. So again, it did offer opportunities for people to come together. And you can see here that some of the students were thinking about how the um, format or the platform we were using offered opportunities for them to interact with one another. So I don't know if you've used Canvas, that's the learning management system that's used by many universities. And the US-based students were used to Canvas. The Ukrainian students were not, and they specifically commented on the fact that Google Classroom, which is what they were used to using, did not give them the opportunity to comment on and reflect on each other's work. So I think that was an important new way of thinking about learning for that group of students. It also gave the students, the participants, opportunities to interact with each other and ask each other questions. So they asked again some about how do you use Canvas in your own teaching and in your own studying. Also, they asked questions about teaching. How would you help your students share their ideas? And so they were learning from one another about teaching and technology. Again, I mentioned the techno-semiopedagogic knowledge. So several of the graduate students in particular mentioned that they had learned from engaging in this virtual exchange how they might construct virtual exchange opportunities for their own students in the future. As I mentioned, though, I think what didn't happen in this exchange was really the opportunity for these participants to learn about each other and reflect on themselves. And here you have a quote from one of the graduate students, US-based graduate students, saying that they were excited to learn with and from the Ukrainian students, and they didn't feel like that really happened. From the organizing or teaching side, some of the challenges that came up for me was I was thinking about the how not to frame the Ukrainian students as sort of experts on living with conflict. And I think that I was too hesitant in some ways to create opportunities for them to talk about their daily lives because I didn't want the focus to be only on the air raids and violence that they were facing in their daily lives. I think that I also one thing I found challenging and continue to find challenging is how to talk about the participants in ways that doesn't identify them exclusively by their home countries. Even in talking with you now, I'm talking about the Ukrainian-based students and the US-based students. So we lose all of the individuality of the different students. And I don't think they got to know each other as individuals. So something that I really want to keep focusing on in my future projects is how to bring in participants' diverse identities, which might be gender or sexuality or religion, and other identities that are important to who they are. I think that we also did not in this project address questions of inequities and access and experience. Before the Ukrainian students joined us, we did do something about the digital divide, but we didn't talk about that really with the Ukrainian students, and I think that was a missed opportunity. And I think that's something that I need to continue to think about, and anybody who does any kind of virtual exchange, particularly in context like this with the Ukrainian students, is to think about the ethics of virtual exchange and the power differences among the participants. I think that I actually had too much of a role in deciding what the project was going to look like, just because I was initiating it, and also because, frankly, I was based in the United States. So in the future, what I'd like to integrate more is more really sort of get to know you activities. We had a brief online orientation for the students, but they didn't really have a chance to get to know one another as individuals before they started doing the activities that I was asking them to do. And what the consequence was that I think the Ukrainian students in part were sort of trying to show off in a very positive way, but just demonstrate what they knew, um, rather than really showing us who they were as people. And I think that that's not surprising because they were bringing with them expectations of needing to sort of display knowledge as opposed to showing some vulnerability. And I can't imagine how they could just come into something and say, sure, I make mistakes, unless we had created an atmosphere where they felt that that was okay. Um, I think that in the future, I'd like to also incorporate materials in different languages, as you saw from the description of where the different students were from. We had a huge amount of resources to draw on potentially, and all of the resources that we looked at were in English, which was the common language, of course, but that meant that we failed to leverage much of the diversity and innovation potential that was potentially part of this project. In the future, I also plan to have students take a greater part in planning the topics. In the next month or so, I'm going to be teaching an online course. It's not a virtual exchange, but working with Kurdish activists in Kurdistan and having them, when I've worked with them in the past, I suggested different guest speakers who could be part of the course. And then this next time working with them, I'm going to have them help me identify guest speakers and really tell us all what the topics are that they're most interested in looking at. I wish I had more deliberately crafted opportunities for the participants to talk about how they were applying the course content in their current settings. As I mentioned, the Ukrainian students were doing their student teaching, so it would have been interesting to see how they were talking, using technology and in those settings. And I need to, if I'd like students and participants to really take initiatives, I need to be more deliberate in creating opportunities for them to co-construct knowledge together. Some of the topics we could have looked at, as I mentioned, would be, say, the digital divide, also the role of technology in teaching. The Ukrainian students, most of them were online for a good part of their coursework during the pandemic, and did at least 2 years, if not more, of their university work online because of the conflict in Ukraine. So just to sum up, I guess what I would say is virtual exchange offers amazing opportunities. I think whether we do it perfectly or not, it's a life-changing experience. But as practitioners and as teachers, we need to keep reflecting and keep learning and not and to trust our experiences. I think, for example, in this, I didn't mention this, but all of the activities in this project were asynchronous. And in the previous project that I did with Afghan learners, the interactions were synchronous. And I think that was a huge factor. So I need to trust that the students are going to be able to adapt and to be resilient and create opportunities for them to do that. So thank you, everybody.